Greetings, candidates, and welcome to the lesson. The subject is Advanced Financial Management. We're continuing with the topic Portfolio Theory. And in our last session, we were studying the first topic, which is the modern portfolio theory. We did the background of the theory, the portfolio expected return, the actual and weighted portfolio risk, deviation of the efficient sets. We drew the efficient frontier, the capital market line and its application. Today we want to wind up that section with the mean variance dominance rule. The mean variance dominance rule. Mean variance dominance rule, candidates, is a principle in investment theory that helps investors to compare and choose between different portfolios based on the expected return and risk. Mean variance dominance rule. That's what helps investors to compare and choose between different portfolios. Helps investors to compare and choose. You compare and then choose between different portfolios. Different portfolios or assets based on expected return and risk. Understand? And the rule, the mean variance dominance rule, is rooted in the modern portfolio theory. It is used to identify the most efficient investments, those that maximize return for a given level of risk, or minimize risk for a given level of return. You understand, candidates? So this mean, the expected return is the mean, and the risk is measured by variance. So we have mean variance, where expected return is the mean, and this risk is measured by variance. So it helps investors to choose between different portfolios or assets based on the expected return, which is the mean. This is mean, and risk, and the rule is written in, it is based on the modern portfolio theory. You understand? It is used to identify the most efficient investments, those that maximize return for a given level of risk, or minimize risk for a given level of return. Now, how does it work? First of all, there is a mean, which I've said is the expected return. This mean is the expected return. The mean is the expected return, and it represents the anticipated return on an asset or portfolio, typically based on historical performance or future projections. So this mean or the expected return can be calculated based on historical data or future projections, and an asset is often a higher mean implies a higher potential return. A higher mean implies a higher potential return. First, you must understand that. Then there is a risk or variance. Mean variance. Variance, as I've said, is measured by risk, which represents the risk of the, it represents the risk of the asset, and it's measured by the volatility or the standard deviation of returns. You understand? This is the risk. Variance is measured by risk. It could be measured by the standard deviation. Standard deviation is the square of, variance is the square of the standard deviation. So we just need these two. Then we have the two, then we can apply the rule. Apply the rule, the mean variance dominance rule. The mean variance dominance. Now, to apply the mean variance dominance rule, investors will look for investments that are either have a higher mean for the same level of risk, or have a lower variance for the same or higher mean. Governor, we are discussing the mean variance dominance rule, and we've said that the mean variance dominance rule is a principle in investment theory that helps investors to compare and choose between different portfolios or assets based on two things: expected return, which is the mean, and the risk, which is measured by variance. That's why we have mean variance dominance rule. So the first thing to do is to determine the mean, which is the expected return of the asset. And the mean, we have said, represents the anticipated return on an asset portfolio, and this return could be calculated using historical data or predictions. The second variable is the variance, which is measured by risk. It is the risk of the asset, measured by volatility or measured by standard deviation. So how do you apply this rule after calculating the mean variance? How do you apply it? I've said there are two ways to apply the rule. To apply the rule, investors do what? They look for two things. One, is they look for investments that either have a higher mean, investment that has a higher mean, which is the expected return. Okay, this is the return. So the expected return should be higher for the same or lower variance. For the same or lower variance or risk. Alternatively, investors will go for the investments or choose investments that have a lower risk or variance, a lower investment that has a lower variance or has a lower risk for the same or higher mean. For the same or higher mean. That's how the rule is applied. And candidates, essentially, portfolio A dominates portfolio B, or asset A dominates asset B. Portfolio A dominates portfolio B if A has a higher expected return and lower risk than portfolio B. Do you get that? Portfolio A dominates portfolio B if portfolio A has both a higher expected return and lower risk than B. If a portfolio has both a higher expected return with a lower risk, then that portfolio dominates portfolio B. But indifference occurs when portfolio A has a higher return but also a higher risk than portfolio B. In such cases, the investor's risk tolerance will influence their choice. Now, it's important to note, candidates, that to apply this rule, not to apply the mean dominance rule, using a formula, formulaically, to apply this rule formulaically. That means using a formula, we use the covariance to compare the portfolios. We use the covariance. Or the covariance of variation. We use the covariance of, let me say, the covariance of variation. Covariance of variation. Let me just say CV. We use CV, covariance of variation. If you have to use a formula, then you have to calculate the covariance of variation of portfolio A. Then we calculate the covariance of variation of portfolio B. Then we compare. because remember we said that mean variance dominance rule helps investors to compare and choose. So first of all, we compare the covariance of the portfolios, then we choose. So we calculate the coefficient of variation. This is coefficient of variation. Coefficient of variation. Because now this coefficient, what it does is that it standardizes the risk relative to the mean. It standardizes the risk over the mean. Coefficient of variation standardizes the risk over the mean. It standardizes the risk over the mean. It standardizes the risk, which is the standard deviation, relative to the mean. Let me say relative. That's a perfect word. Standardize the risk relative to the mean, which is the expected return. You understand? Let's illustrate. Let's have an illustration. Now consider two portfolios, X, and write it on the board. This is a short one. Consider two portfolios. Consider two portfolios, that is X and Y. So we have portfolio X. Portfolio X, the expected return or the mean is 8%. Mean is 8% or expected return, and the standard deviation. What is the standard deviation? Standard deviation is 10%. And portfolio X, Y, the mean is 6%, and the standard deviation is 8%. 8%. So, which portfolio dominates the other? So we calculate the coefficient of variation. To determine which portfolio dominates the other, then you have to calculate the coefficient of variation. So what is the coefficient of variation? Coefficient of variation. Coefficient of variation for portfolio X. What is the formula? Standard deviation over the mean. Is it not? Standard deviation over the mean. Which is equal to 10 over 8. How much is it? Is it 10? Standard deviation, the coefficient of variation of portfolio Y, mean, that is standard deviation over mean, which is equal to so for portfolio Y, is it 8 over 6. Someone says 1.25. So which portfolio dominates the other? So you say this is a 1.25 and this is 1.33. To apply the rule, to apply the mean variance dominance rule, to apply the rule, the investment should offer a higher mean for the same or lower risk, or a lower risk for the same or higher mean. So coefficient of variation standardizes risk relative to the mean. It standardizes risk relative to the mean. So according to the mean-variance dominance rule, candidates, the portfolio with the lowest coefficient of variation is preferable, just as Felista says, it is preferable. Why? A portfolio with the lowest coefficient of variation is preferable because it provides the best return for the amount of risk taken. So portfolio X dominates portfolio Y. Now, I'll give you an assignment. November 2020, question 3B. It's an important assignment in relation to what we've covered. We'll do that assignment.